We work with a lot of companies. So, I mean, when you think about AI specifically, a lot of the use cases do lie in the productivity space, which you can show the return quickly. What excites me the most is actually with some of the ventures we've created where you've actually been able to reimagine the business itself and actually build it with AI at the start of it. So, we've just launched a medtech simulation platform called Agros AI that's just rethought how clinically and medical people are actually taught and immersed into training and how that kind of moves through. And we trialed doing that in some of the roles that I've played like 3 or 4 years ago. It just wouldn't have been possible. But now, with the onset of what's available, suddenly you can do that, and you can do that at a pace that actually the experience is totally different to what you would have imagined it to be.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Ways to Wealth. Today I'm joined by Midu. Midu, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, look, thanks very much for having me. I might just take the liberty of stepping back a little bit, so because it's kind of grounded who I am.
Yeah.
I was born in Africa, Central Africa, so Zambia. Not a lot of people know about that, so I kind of grew up there till 10 years because both my parents were educators.
Yeah.
And at that point in time in Africa, there was a lot of investment actually happening in education and trying to change people's lives, so which was fantastic. So I did that. When I was 10, I moved to New Zealand, did all my education here, so I ended up studying finance. I thought I was actually going to get into law, but at that point in time, there's a new topic that had kind of come up called information systems, and somehow I just took a passion towards that, and I did that. From there, my first job was at a bank. I kind of did that for about less than a year.
Yeah.
And I started finding that my passion was probably a lot more just in the creative space, even though I didn't actually have any traditional training in that sort of space. So what was interesting with that was there was a company that were developing content management systems before everyone had kind of done that. And we ended up they needed someone to actually be the project manager, but there was a good time to kind of learn a lot of different aspects and things. Yeah, so I ended up working in this company developing content management systems. From there, we were actually doing a big project with Zespri. And Zespri ended up getting on really well with the communications director there. And, she said, look, really like what you're doing. If you can actually help us support this system for the next 3 years, we'll support you getting started. And that was kind of the genesis of the first business that I kind of got into.
Right.
Did that for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Cut my teeth, worked the long hours, burnt the midnight candle. Luckily, at that point in time, we got acquired, and then that kind of led me to Australia, where I had a real passion for working in the advertising industry. So I kind of went and worked in the advertising industry, but it was always with emerging tech and specifically digital, and building that out for them. Then from there, I ended up going and working in telco for a long time, so the largest telco in Australia, Telstra. I helped set up their digital divisions and all their digital channels, which was great. I guess through that, I learned a lot about the media landscape, and the media landscape was actually changing a lot with the onset of DSPs, social media, how that kind of works. So I got an opportunity to then go and work at IPG Group, set up their social arm, which was fantastic, build out their DSPs. And then from there, had my second stint at building a company in the mobile technology space. A lot of that kind of came from when I was at Telstra. It was really interesting because when the iPhone dropped, suddenly, like within about a year of that, just the traffic we were actually getting kind of went through the roof, and that kind of led us to starting that company. Did that for a little bit. Came back to New Zealand. I worked for one of the large technology companies here. Helped set up their emerging tech arm. And then I guess, as of last year, we had the AI was huge. We saw that it's going to be quite game-changing, but access to it wasn't equally divided. And so that kind of led us to forming Seed Ventures.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty concise way of kind of giving a pretty good overview of like the kind of the ebbs and flows of your career. Interesting, you went quite early into business ownership, and then actually your primary stint was in between that, right?
Yes.
So you kind of started. Was that to try and kind of, because sometimes it's riskier, but when you start something, you kind of get to jump a few levels.
Yeah.
Kind of unfairly, but if you start a startup and you get far, it's potentially more advantageous than going and starting as an entry-level role, right? Because you do get to do a few jumps, but you could have nothing to really show for it after a few years.
I mean, totally. So, I mean, I guess, I've always been a product builder, and that's what I've really enjoyed.
Right.
So when I started my first company, I just loved the ability to do lots of things, learn lots of things. I guess, from my first business, what I really enjoyed was your learning is just accelerated. But after that, I also felt, because I hadn't had a lot of experience.
Right.
I felt, actually, there's a lot of areas where I was inquisitive, and I've been working with those industries. So almost, with the jobs that I've done, I kind of fell into them and they found me.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated the growth that I was kind of going through. But I also always knew that I just love the building side of things, and I was always going to do that. So yeah.
So you knew from a very young age that you would be a business owner? Was that something, because your parents were educators?
Yeah.
So
I didn't know that.
No.
I guess I was quite inspired by my older brother,
right,
who kind of went down the similar trajectory.
Right.
So, that definitely helped give some confidence. But probably, if I do look back at it, I always had that passion. I just needed to be in those situations for that to happen. Even now, with the latest thing we've started, you never go into it thinking you're just going to win. I think there's definitely an element of risk, but if your passion's there, I think you can go further. Yeah.
Definitely, that helps make it easier when it's more challenging. I guess with something like Seed Ventures, you've got quite a empty canvas, right, in a sense, when you start something like that, and you get to choose roughly what you do, but you're, I guess, taking a hybrid approach with your business, right? Between kind of collaborating with other businesses and generating income through that, and then also, owning your own businesses, building your own products, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, it also it does require a lot of focus. Often, like with any business that you start, it's a liberty to just do stuff that you're purposeful about. You do want to get to a point where it's sustainable, but then you want to focus on why did you actually start this, and what's the impact you're trying to create. So I think, with Seed Ventures, absolutely you're right. Like, we do get the opportunity to work with lots of different industries and focus in. But I think now, as we're kind of growing as well, we have to start thinking about what are those focus areas where we think we can bring the greatest value, but then are we always holding true to the purpose we started off with, which was how do we, help businesses kind of on-ramp into what AI can do for them, but then create actual talent pathways for people into generating new wealth, which is, I think, where we align a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're now in a new age of decentralization, really, of capability, compute, capacity, everything like that. I guess systems were relatively distributed in the computer world because everyone had their own on-prem data centers at one point, and then they moved off to the cloud, and that's quite a centralization. And that, I guess, still exists, and it's still growing like wildfire. And you get systemically important businesses. Actually, something like a Cloudflare, we saw that recently, right, where they had an outage and that took down half the internet. You've got other businesses like AWS that have a lot of compute and a lot of the world's kind of GDP on their servers. So, but from a career perspective, it's clear that there is a shift towards more decentralization as well in careers. So how you earn, how you plan for retirement, plan to retire, you know, and how you plan to build your wealth is kind of not as repeatable as perhaps it once was.
No, and I think that takes a little getting used to, right? Because if we look at least if I speak about my parents' generation, you'd probably do 1 to 2 jobs, maybe 1 career, and that's how you're planning for your retirement. Whereas I think the reality of the change that's happening now has meant it's much more moving towards what's the actual outcome we're trying to chase, and then what role can I play in that, which might not be the same as the last one that I played. And I think that
that talks to decentralization again, right?
Totally. And I think, you know, it takes being comfortable with ambiguity. It takes dropping the ego sometimes, and it takes being curious to learn lots of skills. Yeah,
for sure. What are you kind of most excited? Oh,
that's good.
What are you most excited to be working on at the moment in Scene?
Look, I think for me, we work with a lot of companies. So, I mean, when you think about AI specifically, a lot of the use cases do lie in the productivity space. So, which is
for sure.
Which you can show the return quickly. What excites me the most is actually with some of the ventures we've created, where you've actually been able to reimagine the business itself and actually build it with AI at the start of it. So what I kind of mean by that is, so, you know, we've just launched a medtech simulation platform called Agros AI. That kind of, that's just rethought how clinically and medical people are actually taught and immersed into training and how that kind of moves through. And if we were, you know, we trialed doing that in some of the roles that I've played like 3 or 4 years ago, it just wouldn't have been possible. But now, with the onset of what's available, suddenly you can do that, and you can do that at a pace, but actually the experience is totally different to what you would have imagined it to be. And in a similar sort of way, you know, we've been building a immersive language learning platform. The way that that's actually even experienced would be unimaginable many years ago. So I think for me, that really excites me because it's a new space where actually there's no set paradigms exactly for how it needs to be done. And you can actually create totally new businesses, totally new scaling abilities, new wealth opportunities through that. So that excites me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just building fresh is just, you don't get the legacy problems and ways you have to try and solve them and do workarounds to make it all kind of work.
Yeah.
It's nice when you get a blank canvas in that regard where you can build quick and you get a lot of wins quickly, but obviously you don't have the brand, you don't have, and no one cares about what you've built because it's yours and it's new, and why should they? They've got another 1,000 options typically of something they can use. And then you've got obviously the next problem, which is how do you build distribution?
True.
Something like a med tech business is quite nice because it's B2B. Yes. I think B2B is nice, and it's less daunting probably to get distribution because you can do because of the deal sizes typically. Going and doing kind of door knocking or cold calls or more B2B networking and relationships is a way that you can get going, and it means that you can get a big check quickly, and it helps with things. B2C is a different beast, but it also has all these multipliers that you can jump onto if you can get a few things right. Would you say that you've focused more on B2B solutions?
I would say for most of the ventures we're currently doing, it has focused on B2B. And I think you're absolutely right, because with B2C, the scaling possibility is amazing, but the investment in just really understanding the customer and what's the actual core need, and really honing in on that, that's a big investment and has to be done really, really well.
And the marketing budgets usually have to be much higher.
I think sometimes the experimentation you can do, starting with B2B, is a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah. Your iteration cycles are kind of larger in a way, and you get to learn bigger lessons quicker.
Yes.
Well, quicker, but in a time frame that's probably more comparable, actually. Yes. Right. Absolutely. You do a kind of 3-month, kind of 12-week kind of program with a potential client or a pilot client, whatever, and then you learn a lot through that process. Whereas B2C, 12 weeks is nothing.
Nothing. No. Yeah, you'd spend you could spend a whole year just really understanding your customer, doing that really, really well. As good as AI is to give you insights, B2C really requires that rigor. Yeah. Well,
and also now we have a lot of slop in the market, right? That's another big. Yep. So it's signal versus noise. Obviously, a massive enabler. We've really doubled down on it internally in our business. We have B2B revenue as well through our ecosystem, and it's definitely amazing. We just opted into a new tool in one of our business lines yesterday, and it's a low barrier to entry tool, but the problems it's solving is super high value, and it's like, well, we could build that. We could, and we have a similar version that's nowhere near as good in the product right now. I'm like, but then I have to maintain it. And sometimes you do want to delegate parts out, right, and be intelligent with it. But it always comes down to to having a clear strategy and understanding the conflicts, invert the problem, right? Like what could go wrong if I'm using Salesforce? It's like when we were using Refinitiv. You might have heard of Refinitiv, LSEG, terrible customer experience and very expensive, and we were very glad to churn off of them. Right? Just unbelievably poor.
And I think that there's also no one's quite figured it out yet, the transition. So is the experience that is best for people using Salesforce integrated with some Gen AI tools that help you generate what you actually need, because actually your core data is actually served inside, a Dynamics or a Salesforce or your ERP system? Or are you better to experience it in a wrapper like a ChatGPT or a Claude or a Gemini, and actually integrate it with an MCP server and be able to ask questions? I don't think we've quite nailed that yet. I think there's just that, that's what I was saying about technology. We're quite early at the moment in the journey, so I think that's still to be figured out at this point in time.
Well, I think that's where the slop exists, right? 100%. Is that you go, okay, I can do this thing, and this is a real clear example. And like we've done some work where we were helping couple businesses work on some key streamlines of work that ultimately is how do you take unbilled revenue to build very quickly by completing the task and saving us time so that we don't have to hire another person to double our output. So we have this objective of taking that workflow down by 20%. Turns out it looks like we can actually do a bit more than that. But, it's very easy at a first glance to be like, oh yeah, you could easily do this. But then you have to really question, okay, for all of these areas, where does it fall over? Do I have reliable data? Do I know that I'm going to get a reliable response? Am I opening up data issues? So there's all these different things. And then you go, okay, well, a kind of seemingly simple integration actually is a decent piece of work. It's going to take hundreds of hours to get this right, but over time you're going to have a huge payback. But it's very different from 80% working MVP with this has potential to this has actually solved our business problem and we can rely on it like we would an employee that we're paying $100,000 a year. Because ultimately what you're doing is delegating compute to tasks that you may have got humans to do, or you may have got a mix of teams and humans to do. But not everything is a nail, right? So not everything needs to be done with Gen AI as well. That's true.
That's true. And I think
it's an inefficient way of compute.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, I think whenever you implement things like that as well, it's like, what's my ongoing evaluation process, right? So, because I guess it's like any piece of software. You're not going to build it and then it's just going to do everything that there's always going to be that level of how do you actually make it work. And I think, a really good way to think about that is with the people that I have today, how do I get them more comfortable coming in almost with their army of orchestrators that can actually help build some of these tasks that you're kind of going through? And then what value can they actually provide from the human aspect to make sure there's evaluation, it's truly a values, it's delivering stuff. So
yeah, I mean, you've got this opportunity, I guess, to say to your employee, to say to your team, hey, we can be better as a team, and we can insulate all of ourselves that's in the business from economic disruption by adopting AI and basically creating a better business. And obviously it's difficult because you've got to try and persuade people to be in it for the long term,
right?
And you want to try and hopefully motivate people with long-term incentives, like equity. Again, core to our values is that we believe that everyone has the right to build wealth for themselves and have the opportunity, the freedom to choose how they get there. So that's really important, and that ultimately means that if you say that, you have to do it. So that's why we've got very aggressive ESOP regimes within our entities, and I guess we are now moving towards more of a similar model to you guys, where the ventures that we do get involved with, we have much larger stakes, and we can contribute more and better. It means that the opportunities are less and more narrow in nature, but we really can move the needle and help entrepreneurs and operators that are very good at what they do. So when we were talking about this on the phone, when we started, we thought we'd have much smaller positions and more companies. And what we're finding over time is actually they will still crop up from time to time, but I kind of see those as almost injection in engagements. They don't actually need us forever. They just might have a specific problem they're trying to solve. And that's where a micro engagement comes in. But I think like expectations on both sides have to be understood, right? Because at the end of the day, if you've got a small stake in something, it's the same with someone that puts an investment into a business, a VC firm that comes into a company. Ultimately, it's highly likely they'll have a relatively small stake, at least in the beginning, which means that realistically you're probably going to have very little control. And that's just kind of something you have to accept. If you have a small stake in something, you just have to be okay with the fact that you're actually not able to impact the outcome.
That's true. And I mean, I totally agree with you, because like when you're building out ventures and something new, I think you do have to have intentionality, and you do have to have a good stake in it. And that's why I do think often by taking a slightly larger stake up front, it actually helps the impact of what you're generating and actually getting to that a lot quicker. So I think it's always, you're totally right. Like whenever we're actually investing in a venture or being part of it, we do look at it from a perspective of, sure, there's some money that needs to be exchanged to get things going, but most importantly, what's the impact that you can actually bring to the equation? And is this really something you're going to be able to see out for like the next 10 years? And I think that's kind of like a decision you have to make when you're actually getting into venturing.
Yeah. For sure. Or how do you see your role over that 10 years?
True.
Because it might be very intensive for the first 3 months, the first 6 months, the first 2 years.
Yes.
And then it's likely going to evolve as the company evolves, right? So it's like, you have to be willing and seeing a future that might be 10 years in the future, and taking the small steps every single day to kind of continue on that path. But then at the same time, what's your role now? And how do you have lots of signal, no noise, right? Where you actually are deriving the most amount of like productivity, I guess, to the entity in the short in that season of the company's life cycle.
I think you make a very good point there. In terms of knowing your position today and knowing your position in 10 years, and definitely that ambiguity and that mindset of, you're not the owner of an idea. Like ultimately, different people will charter in the right course over time, I think is really important.
Well, you were talking about, you were actually talking about that earlier, right? When you're like, now that we have different roles, you might be taking a seemingly more subservient role. I thought this was where you were getting at, where prior you might have been leading a project, and now that project is a different project, and you're in a new project, and all of a sudden your title isn't the same shiny one you had last time.
100%. I mean, I just look at myself as well, right? Because as I said, I'm very much a builder. Sometimes I can play the role of a project manager again, that I started off with. Sometimes I'm the creative guy. Sometimes I'm actually leading the development side of things. And I think you need to be flexible for that to happen, and you got to drop your ego.
Yeah, for sure. So, how do you currently see, like, I guess actually more established businesses working out how to approach solving some of these workflows and actually getting a tangible start in the, I guess, adoption of compute into your business?
Yeah, I think part of like why we started Scene was, I think very established organizations, they have investments that they're already making, right?
Yeah.
They might actually have dedicated data and AI teams.
Yeah.
So they actually have the liberty to be able to work some of these things out. Of course, driving organizational change is not an easy thing. But for SMEs, who actually we believe can potentially see the greatest uplift, often the challenge is, how do we start without getting burnt?
Yes.
And ultimately that was the start of Scene Ventures, which is actually, if we think about Aotearoa New Zealand, SMEs actually drive a lot of our market. How do we actually create a platform that gives them that easy way to actually onboard and almost experiment?
Yep.
How some of, even the fundamental productivity things can be solved through AI, and is it actually beneficial? And through doing that, if they're generating new wealth, can they actually create the talent pathways for new people? And that's I think a really, really important thing that we need to invest in as a country.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah, I like George Soros and Druckenmiller. They have this thing around. It's not about how much you win or lose. It's how much you lose when you lose, and how much you win when you win.
Yeah.
Like you can lose a lot if the impact is low. Right, so you can have these experiments without getting burnt. You just need to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where it gets exciting, and all of a sudden you put yourself in a position where you can get burnt.
Yeah,
it comes back to that liability thing. You want your liabilities always as low as possible, and that even goes to the volatility within your team, training your team, product, etc. It's how do you reduce that kind of tail risk? But yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
No, thanks a lot. Thank you for that.
Awesome.